time on our podcast. So welcome to Cornwall. We're out here on location. This is Paul Archer's regular Monday morning mortgage insights podcast and live stream for you. So hope all is well. Let's get on with some content for you that you're going to enjoy today. We're live on location, I suppose. Fancy way of putting it here in Cornwall. And it's our second week, really enjoying it. The weather's not so good, mind you, but then we didn't come to Cornwall in February for the weather, as we came down for many other things. So hope you're good, hope you're having fun and all those good things. So got a few ideas for you to help you in your mortgage business today. So whether you're listening to the podcast or watching this live stream, I've got those ideas to help you in your business. The first one I've entitled Reputation and Provenance, which sounds rather grand, really. Now, we're talking here about your own personal reputation or provenance. Now, The Economist magazine last week published an article about publications, really, or content providers, be they text, video, photos, whatever it is you're creating content-wise, is now, of course, being taken over by artificial intelligence. And it's getting better. Taylor Swift was in the news the weekend for artificial intelligence, cloning her imagery, etc. And people's writing and photographs and podcasts, when you see them, when you see a photograph online, you don't really know if it's true or not, do you? You just don't know. So what's happening for the future, the lesson, is obviously what you're posting is important. Whatever content is that you're posting is vitally important, but it's where it comes from. It's the provenance of that particular piece of content. Now, we have our own brand, our own reputation here. So when I'm publishing, it's always from me, Paul Archer, and whenever I'm putting out stuff, it always comes from me. So we're quite keen to make sure that people know where it's come from. And that's the message for all advisors, really. If you're posting content on LinkedIn, make sure people know where it comes from, because in the future, that will be just as important as the actual content itself. Here we are, as our first tip and idea to help you. Now, the second idea I've got for you, which I thought about presenting this morning to help you out, and this is for all you BDMs out there, you business development managers. And we sent this out as an email actually yesterday evening on Sunday. Now, many of you that listen to this are brokers, advisors, financial advisors, of course you are, and you're very busy people, and you get contacted by BDMs from lenders, providers, insurance companies, and whatever, whose job is to get you to sell their products. That's what they're targeted for. So they often want to contact you to make contact and build a relationship. And many of them are very good at building relationships. And many of them are very pally types and very conversational. I get all of that. But of course, you're really busy. And this is a message really for BDMs. It's called, before you go for a meeting with a new broker, a new mortgage advisor, make sure you complete a 9-box grid. So what I want you to think about is take a piece of paper or the calendar invitation that you do and draw it into 9 boxes. And each of those boxes has a heading that you'll want to be populating during your very first meeting with the mortgage broker. So I've got 9 headings for you. Number 1 for you is the customer's name and the date of the meeting, be it online or video or face-to-face. That's an easy one, isn't it? Number 2 is other attendees that may be attending the meeting that you're in. And if you know those people, of course, beforehand, write them in the box before you go. Number 3 is meeting objectives. What are your objectives of the meeting? And be as precise as you can. Number 4 is customer needs. Now, this is something you'll populate as the meeting progresses. In other words, you'll write down what the needs are as you start to explore them. Number 5 are the triggers that you spot before the meeting and during the meeting. Triggers, by the way, are internal or external. These are things that usually pains or discomforts that the broker is feeling that she wants to solve, maybe. It could be an issue internally in the company. It could be something to do with the industry. Maybe she wants to be able to sell more protection, which is a trigger. It happens. Things occur which cause triggers. You need to be aware of what they are. Number 6 is budgets and timescales. Maybe not so much budgets, but timescales, when they might use you, why might they use you? That's number 6. Number 7 are key people in the firm. Don't forget that when you're talking to businesses, it's not just one individual, there's other people in the firm that you need to be aware of, and maybe there's an introduction you could have maybe to the compliance director or the sales director, somebody like that. Number 8 is motivational factors. What will motivate the mortgage advisor to use you? What is her motivational factors? And the last one for you are next steps, in other words, action steps. Now, if you had those 9 items on a grid, before you attended the meeting, and then during the meeting you populated them as you went along. It keeps you on track. It stops you going off track talking about all sorts of things you don't need to talk about, and it preserves the time from the broker because she's very busy, and you can't just rock up for a couple of hours, bring your donuts in, and just get away with spending 2-3 hours just chatting about football and stuff like that. You have to get down to business. So that's the 9-box grid. Make sure you put it on the calendar invitation, of course, when you send out your meeting invitation. And all you mortgage advisors, if your BDM doesn't have a structure or an agenda, suggest they use the 9-box grid, and it will certainly help them to keep the point. That's my second point for you. All right, so I can hear the seagulls. If you can hear them, lovely sound, of course, seaside. The waves are crashing down today. It's quite a swell in the ocean. It's over there in Porthleven. You've got this harbour wall, and the water crashes against the wall. It goes massively high up in the sky. You often see the photographs when there's a storm in the southwest. They usually get the cameramen to come down here to Porthleven, take a photograph of the church getting covered by water. Pretty spectacular stuff. Now, my last thought to share with you on my short podcast and live stream today. My last thought for you is something I'm doing next week at a conference. I'm attending a conference next week in London. I'm presenting for a couple of hours to about 40, 50 mortgage brokers. And we're doing advanced communication. In other words, giving them some ideas, tips and techniques to be able to communicate with clients organically, face to face, if you like, or on video, doesn't make a difference. But really using your skills as a person, as a communicator, and really be able to listen to the client, listening through body language, watching, and all sorts of things. We're going to get into the head, and we're going to get into NLP. Now, this one is neuro-linguistic programming. I want to take a look at some thinking styles and which protection coaching gap technique you would use. Now, when you're selling protection, of course, the key thing is to coach the protection gap with your client. Because the client has a need for protection, we know that, we do fact finding, but the client doesn't often see it or want it, and they may be putting it off. So we have to coach them, in other words, ask them questions, get them involved, to see the gap that they have in their protection, and therefore, plugging the gap is something they want to do. Now, I teach a number of ways of doing that. People choose the one that works for them. The point I'm making here is that we need to focus the right one for the right client, because clients are all different, you see, customers. They're all different. And NLP gives us a way of assessing somebody's thinking style. A bit more complex than that, because NLP makes things complex, but essentially in your head, you think of the world around you. You represent the world around you in your head. And people represent the world, or they think, in one of 4 ways. Well, they have a mixture of all 4, but there's 4 ways in which they think about the world. And I've got a little visual aid to help you here, because I can. Here we are. We've got here 4 ways in which people think. They may think visually, kinesthetically, auditorily, or digitally. Now, let's talk about visual, kinesthetic, auditory, digital. And then I'll quickly tell you which protection skill to use. Now, people who are visual people, they primarily think of pictures in their head. They're picture thinking people. They're imagery, movies, photographs. So whenever they're representing something or hearing something or making sense of the world, they think in pictures and images. And a big proportion of the population in this country are visual thinkers, particularly the younger people who've been brought up with mobile phones, tablets, imagery all over their worlds. So that's the first one. Second one is what we call kinesthetic or kino. Now, these people, and remember, everybody has a preference. These people are feelers. They like to have physical or emotional feelings about how they see the world, or how they feel about the world, I should say. They're known as kinesthetic people. Thoughts, emotions, thinking, touch, personal touch, external touch, internal touch. These are kinesthetic people. There's a small percentage in the UK population of kinesthetic people. Then you have auditory people. Now, auditory people hear information. They hear sounds, and they represent their world by sounds and hearing. They're all about the auditory sense, and that's the way they prefer. The last one is digital. Now, digital thinkers think more logically, rationally. They have logical arguments in their heads. They're very precise in that respect. These people talk to themselves a lot. That's how they make sense of the world around them. So there you got 4 preferences. Now, all of us have a preference for one of those. Many of us have a mixture as well. Now, for me, I'm very logical, very digital, but my secondary one is auditory. I struggle actually to think of pictures in my head, which amazes some people. But in the session next week, we teach you how to recognize your client's preferred style of thinking. We do it through eye movements, through listening to their language, and generally picking up their body language. And we can talk about it more later. But once you've decided who they are, eye movements, by the way, help you enormously. Just Google eye movements. I've got some videos on the YouTube channel to help you. Once you've discovered which the client prefers, then you decide which coaching protection gap technique you're going to use. And there's 4 ways of protection coaching. Now, the first one for you, if they're visual, then I would recommend you use the lifeline. Now, the lifeline, if you remember, is a visual. You take your, we talked about this before, haven't we? You take your piece of paper, your A4, and you do a lifeline. You do a imagery there, and you start to look at different parts of the customer's life, and you draw pictures on it with the customer alongside them as well. It allows the customer to see their future, their past, where they're going, their hobbies, interests, career, aspirations, and then the impact, of course, that having a protection gap would have on their future. Because it's done visually, customers who are visual people really latch into it. They really see the benefits of that. So that's lifeline for visual people. If your customer happens to be kinesthetic, now in that respect, you want to get them to feel emotions. And we talk about what if questions, and we used to call them disturbing questions, which I think is a bit wrong, really, isn't it? And what you do here, of course, is you ask them the question, what if? What would happen if? It's classic stuff, isn't it? It's to come. What would you do if something happened to your wife and you're on your own to look after the children? How would you cope? Those sort of questions, which are difficult to ask, evoke feelings, emotions, and people start to think about the distress it causes them. Now, and then an emotional or kinesthetic person would really relate to those. So that's the technique to use for kinesthetics. Now, the auditory people, remember, these people communicate by hearing. Now, for these types of people, you want to tell them a story. Stories, of course, are great to listen to. It reminds me of as a kid when I used to watch Jackanory on the telly. And the artist, the author would talk a story, would tell the story. She would have accents for different characters. Now, I'm not saying you go to that extreme, but you tell a story. Now, when I was a life assurance salesman myself, I used to tell a story of my first life claim. True story, where the young couple, the guy died. He was working on the railway line and got killed one night doing some sidings work on the railway line. Tragic, and we talk about the story to illustrate what happens when people do have life assurance and the impact. At least it can provide money. It can't obviously replace people. But it's a story. And auditory people will listen to that story and they'll love it. That's the whole point, you see. You shouldn't do all 3. You just one that works. Now the last one, the digital person, quite a large proportion of people are. Now these people will resonate or will see the logic of you giving them facts and figures and logical persuasive techniques. So the life offices all produce those lovely brochures, don't they, saying 1 in 4 people can die of cancer, that sort of thing. They've got glossy brochures with facts, statistics. They love all of that. Just get their PowerPoint decks from those conferences. They're full of numbers, aren't they? Because that's how they roll. Now just pick those up and give those to the logical digital people. The logical arguments, statistics, the information about cancer and heart attacks and long-term illnesses, that sort of thing. And logical digital people will pick that up. They will run with that because they believe in it and it makes sense to them. So there you got 4 protection gap coaching techniques that you can use if you wish to. And they all work. But what I'm saying here is be careful which one you use for the right client. And that's all about really listening to people and watching them closely and then adapting your advice process to suit them. It's really clever stuff, and the NLP is a fantastic tool to use to do this. And we're going to be talking about that at the conference next week, which I'm thoroughly looking forward to. Up in London, actually, up in the smoke. So I'm looking forward to going from Cornwall in 1 week, the countryside and the seaside and the rocks and the mountains and the walks and things, Well, there's not many mountains here in Cornwall. All the way to London and Canary Wharf and the Tower and all those good things. I'm looking forward to that. We're going to be back in the studio next week, so usual whiteboards and all those good things. So hopefully you enjoyed our little discussion this afternoon, and you have a great week, won't you? Enjoy yourself, and well, I'll see you all again next week. So it's a bye from me, and see you next week. Bye.